We are back with more NFL coverage, and to get things started, the Bears would sign Tyson Bagent to a 2-year, $10 million contract extension earlier in the week. And honestly, for a solid backup, he has emerged as a pretty respectable piece on that team. Now, obviously, Caleb Williams is going to be their guy, but in the spot minutes that the undrafted free agent out of Shepherd College has gotten with the team, he hasn't really done all that bad. You know, there have been flashes, and he certainly had his own share of mistakes, but when you need someone to steady the course, he's a bit of a younger option in that regard. And I suppose you have to give credit to the Bears for wanting to keep that quarterback room as fresh as possible. Like, he's recently turned 25 years old, and he has shown from time to time that he can, again, if needed, if Caleb Williams goes down with some injury, God forbid, you have someone that can be relied upon, at least decently enough. Yes, the touchdown to interception ratio is not really favoring him right now, but still, in the reps that he got, he did complete 65.7% of his passes, which is definitely in the upper half of the NFL. And he's not even slated to really be a starter at all. If he can continue to do these things in spot minutes for them, he's going to make himself a pretty valued backup around the league, no matter whether he still is a Bear within the next few years or whether he's on another team carrying out these duties. And it's definitely something that could impact him completely, because there was something that came out mentioning how emotional he got and impressive when finding out that he got that money. So even if it's not really much compared to some of the star players in the NFL, you know, when you can ink that kind of deal to acquire any amount of, I guess, money from a team, you know, that's truly something special for any player involved, whether they're a role player, whether they're a star player, it doesn't matter. Like, and it's just important as well, again, tying into some of the other stuff I've been covering in both sports when it comes to how these players handle their money. It's really just about making sure that you're investing it in the right stuff. Simply put, and it feels like Bagent is going to be able to do that, and then some. So that's what's up. But the Bears, although this was pretty heartwarming news for them, they would get some worse news in just a little bit, because it would be detailed that one of their backup cornerbacks in Terell Smith is going to miss the rest of the season due to a knee injury. I suppose he suffered within practice. Now, I think I saw a few of the Bears' preseason games, namely against the Dolphins, and he was getting some burn. This apparently was a player who was fighting for a roster spot. And so the fact that you now don't even get a chance to really carry that out and end up potentially losing that spot to someone else is certainly tough. Like, there might be room for him to still be on the team. And he honestly did fine last year as a sort of probably 5th, 6th string cornerback for them. But it's just a truly missed opportunity to compound on that and gain even more trust from the defensive coordinator running that scheme. You know, missing an entire year of that potential progression, because keep in mind, they have a new defensive coordinator right now. So you have to be able to be available enough in order to fully understand the playbook. Because it's going to look much different than what he's been accustomed to for his first 2 years in the NFL. And you don't even get an opportunity to do that. That certainly will hurt a little bit. But in reality, I'm sure that they'll be okay. They are going to have a sound defense under Dennis Allen as it is. Again, he sucks as a head coach. And, people want to keep on talking about, oh, but he has the experience. No, he's proven time and again that he's just fucking terrible. And simple as that, right? But as a defensive coordinator, he is much better. And again, in that kind of system, he might have been able to increase his role and presence on the roster. But just like that, an injury is going to take away all of that progress completely. So that's unfortunate. You can hope that he will eventually be able to recover from it fully and effectively in this situation. And then we have a lot of other things other than just injuries in this particular video, but they just keep on coming. Like, they do not stop. For instance, look at what's going on with the Falcons, because their offensive line right now, with a couple of the injuries that they have suffered, they are in total danger right now, because their right guard, I believe, in Storm Norton, just recently underwent ankle surgery, and he's gonna miss the next 6 to 8 weeks, definitely ruling him out for at least the first few games of the season. On a line that is trying to be as gel together as they possibly can in the hopes of protecting Michael Penix Jr. very, very well, and making sure that he does not face a ton of pressure or a ton of potential opportunities for just getting injured by a free rusher or by just a gang tackle in the backfield. You don't want that to happen to an individual in Michael Penix Jr. who now appears to be, if he performs well enough, the franchise quarterback for that organization. So it's important that the line is healthy and available to take those next steps together. And that is just one of their core losses. Now, granted, Storm Norton might not be in the upper echelon of right guards, but when it comes to chemistry on that front, missing time like that is certainly going to hurt them. Even though they've gone through the practice and gone through different training camp exercises, there is no true way to gauge whether or not they'll be able to be as good of an offensive line as they can be until they start proving this stuff in game time. And Storm Norton will be out of commission for at least a little while, so that's going to hurt them. On the other hand, though, it gets even worse because Caleb McGary, an individual who recently got paid to be the blindside blocker for Michael Penix Jr. since he is left-handed dominantly, he also suffered a leg injury and was carted off the field, and now is also set to miss significant time. Now again, there wasn't necessarily any status on how much time he would miss, but if they're stating as such, you can imagine that he will also be out for at least the first few games of the season. If not that, maybe even half the season, which could spell disaster for how they operate. And, correction, Storm Norton is not a right guard, but he is their backup left tackle. So both very important pieces on opposite ends of the offensive line are now going to be out for at least a decent amount of the season. That's not good. And when you look at their backup plans as well, it's kind of scary. Now, it's not finalized because obviously they have to make roster cuts. But let's just think about this. The only left tackles that are available right now for them are Jake Matthews. Obviously, he's going to be the unquestioned starter. And then third stringer Jordan Williams. Meanwhile, Storm Norton now joins Tyrone Wheatley Jr. potentially on the injured reserve list. And then for the right tackle position, Caleb McGary is obviously going to be out for some time. And then backing him up are Brandon Parker and third stringer Jack Nelson. And with one of the recent preseason games from the Falcons, Jack Nelson is definitely a little bit jumpy. I'm not going to lie. The entire preseason match versus the Cowboys, he was just getting himself in just terrible situations. Just drawing, committing all of these penalties, being out of position on multiple occasions, and with the frame that he has, for him to get moved off the line and completely demolished on that front, as much as he was, if he has to play significant time rather than sit behind a guy like McGary and develop those skills, it's going to get much worse for him before it gets any better. Yet they may not have a choice. Again, it is just a horrible situation for them to be dealing with. But, I mean, there are ways around it. You know, different teams have been active in terms of getting free agents, in terms of getting trades engineered around this time. I wouldn't be surprised if the Falcons decided to go after a free agent tackle on either side. They're going to need to, for as long as these guys are injured. And again, that also depends on whether or not they're going to place them in the IR. Because once that happens, they wouldn't necessarily count against the number of players on the roster. So that's definitely going to be important to see whether or not they designate them with that status. Also, too, it also depends on how much they really trust this core of potential backups to hold it down until they get back. Because if they don't, they're probably going to make this move very soon. If they do believe, for whatever reason, that they can hang in there, they'll probably just keep it as it is, string these guys along, and give them a fair amount of reps that they would need to at least become accustomed to this offense and all of the tendencies of their quarterback. Again, once these guys return, they're probably going to be benched again. But at the very least, if you can weather the storm, if you can keep Michael Penix Jr. as clean as possible, you're doing exactly what you have to do, no matter who you have out there. So that's really all you can ask for there. You hope that they can actually get healthy once more. Because again, in their own distinct ways, they are serving as key pieces on that offensive line. You can never have too many blindside blockers and also other protectors on the outside of the quarterback. And to lose multiple in just a span of a few days is highly just surreal to think about. They may be able to recover, but I don't know. If it looks sluggish, especially with some of the teams that they're facing early in the season. More injuries, man. It's not a good thing. to be covering this many injuries in a row. But that, again, like I said, they just keep on happening. Because Lamar Jackson and Jordan Addison would both leave their practices with injury. For Lamar, it was more of a foot injury. Daniel Vele, yeah, Ravens fans love that guy. He accidentally stepped on his foot, I assume, in the middle of a play where he was blocking in pass protection. And I guess he just so happened to catch a piece of his foot. They believed initially from other reports that it was a hand or a wrist injury, and Jackson confirmed that it was his foot that got stepped on, and they said that he would be okay. Also, per other reports from Adam Schefter and the like, he got an MRI done on it, and they found that the results were negative. So he's going to be all right. And he's said that himself. And yet fans are still in a rut about that one. I guess I can't blame them. Like, this is literally a person who is, again, obviously, he would want to do more when it counts. But as it stands, he is one of the most accomplished quarterbacks of this generation. And he is only getting better. So if any report would have came out about him missing any amount of time, they would have been completely justified in being on his ass. Because there's no way that you as a blocker, like, obviously it's going to happen. Sometimes we've seen different gaffes where quarterbacks trip over their linemen and drop back. It's not necessarily uncommon, but to just flat out step on his foot in a situation where whenever you're in a simulated practice, every single time a coach is going to tell you, especially if that quarterback is elite and the unquestioned starter, they're going to tell you that no one should even be thinking about touching the quarterback. So how is it that you managed to get so much as a foot on him? You got to be more careful than that. Meanwhile, Jordan Addison was feared to have suffered a hand or arm injury, but they also state that that was just blown out of proportion and that he is probably going to heal up from that pretty soon. So again, while there were designations initially, both of them appear at this point to have avoided anything truly serious. And again, with all the injuries that have gone on that have just taken seasons away from people at this point, it's good to know that sometimes, in some cases, they can completely avoid these disasters, in a sense. Because both of those injuries would hurt the team. No question about it. Again, we're talking about unquestioned starters in both of these guys. And for Addison, it would suck even more, I would think, for him specifically. You're already going to be suspended. And if the injury was serious enough, it might have even taken away more of the season from you. But again, at least that is not what ended up happening at all. And that's truly something to appreciate. We have a trade, and in this particular one, the Browns would send Jowon Briggs and a 2026 7th rounder to the Jets in exchange for a 2026 6th rounder. Now, I'm not going to lie, I am not all too familiar with Jowon Briggs at this point. But honestly, it feels like a decent move to make. You get back a solid piece of draft compensation, and you also just clear up enough space on that defensive line front for your defensive tackles. to truly make the most out of their roles. I mean, when you look at these guys here, it's like they don't truly need him at all. I mean, they obviously drafted Mason Graham in the draft, but they also have Shelby Harris as a backup. They have Malik Collins as a starter. And Michael Hall Jr. out of Ohio State is also a very, very, very good prospect to have. Now, he's out right now, but once he comes back in, I'd expect him to be the third string defensive tackle. Now, whether or not he plays on the right or left side, that'll be up to the Browns and their defensive coordinator to determine. But they're pretty stacked on that front, as it is with all those guys. And they have a couple other pieces, but obviously those 3-4 guys are going to be getting a heavy percentage of all of the snaps at those two positions. There's just no room for Jowon Briggs to truly do anything with that team. And so with that, sending him to the Jets is a fair play. I don't really think the Jets would be in position to have much use for Briggs, but let's go ahead and take a look. Because, when you look at it, they have Quinnen Williams, obviously. They have Derek Nottie as a third stringer, and they have Jowon Briggs as a fourth stringer. Meanwhile, at third string for the right side, they have Leonard Taylor III, and at fourth, they have Fatorma Mulba. Let's just say that, again, roster cuts are going to be made within the next couple of days. So the first step for him is to make the team. He just got there. So he's going to have to do a tremendous amount of work through all of these different practices to ensure that he can at least secure a roster spot. And he's always going to be fighting for more reps. In his position, he's the final string here. There is no other way out of it for him. He's going to have to continue to fight his way up the depth chart. Maybe he can pull it off, and it would be interesting to see. But honestly, with another trade that I'll get into later that the Jets also made, that could become increasingly harder to deviate from all of the injury talk. There's a different circumstance awaiting one DeMarcus Robinson, because if you remember, literally less than a year ago, after their regular season matchup against the Eagles, the one in which Saquon Barkley ran all over their asses, DeMarcus Robinson was involved in a DUI. Okay? He was not formally suspended or anything, but it did stain his record at that time. You would think from that situation, and even he came out and said this was something that he would learn from. All right? He said that himself. Why is it that less than a year later, he was now involved with yet another one? What the hell is that? This happened a little over a month ago, and I'm pretty sure that I touched on it. But nonetheless, that kind of time is just how is it? You don't even have this situation happening multiple years down the line or anything like that. This is literally within a span of less than a year, and you're getting yourself involved in something like this multiple times. You didn't learn anything from the first situation. How are people really supposed to believe that? And again, I guess the NFL, maybe, I don't even know if I can say that they were just generous towards him the first time. Maybe they really just didn't care all that much about it. But if you're going to repeat the same offense like that, why would they not make the decision to take action on it? And that's exactly what they would end up doing, according to this article from the AP. Because as this quote states right here, San Francisco 49ers coach Kyle Shanahan said receiver DeMarcus Robinson is facing a 3-game suspension to start the season for violating the league's substance abuse policy. End quote. It is like, what the hell is just going on? Like, think about this. They just recently picked up DeMarcus Robinson because of how terrible their wide receiver situation is right now. And yet they're also not going to have him for the first 3 games of the season. With him recently getting there, again, you're trying to create enough camaraderie and connection with the roster around you. That is important. And you don't have time to waste at all with these moves coming just before the very start of the season. So that is a great setback for him in this situation. Like, through it all, he somehow managed to be one of the leading wide receivers for the Rams last season. And with his combination of skills, there's no doubt that he could at least make himself a solid piece for the 49ers. In fact, with all of his stops, he's been at least a decent enough wide receiver for every single team he's been on. Sans for the Ravens, maybe, right? But still, like, that kind of reliability is going to be valued in an offensive system like this, and with a wide receiver core that, again, as I've repeatedly stated, has a lot of question marks. And again, looking at that room as a whole, it just gets worse and worse. Everybody's injured. Literally, everybody's injured. Or facing some kind of suspension or potential hindrance to their play on the field. Literally. And this article goes on to state the same thing. Whether it be established veterans or even some of their younger, unproven guys. These aren't discriminating against any, like, they are affecting almost every single wide receiver in that organization. And again, you're just really hoping that this is something, especially if you're a 49ers fan, that they can overcome. Like, this was literally the story of last season at pretty much every position, damn near, when it came to just the injury bug. And now in a season where you're trying to turn things back around, the road to that gets even tougher. With you dealing with this load of injuries to just that position. And now to top it all off, you have this. It's getting ridiculous out here, man. It truly is. But right back around to the Jets, because they would engage in yet another move for a defensive tackle. It appears as though they're doing as best as they can to fill out that room, because they would pair up with the Vikings as the mini squad would trade Harrison Phillips and a 2027 7th rounder to the Jets in exchange for a 2026 6th rounder and a 2027 6th rounder as well. Having access to the same depth chart here, Harrison Phillips actually happens to be the starting defensive tackle right alongside Quinnen Williams. And this is a return to the AFC East for him, because obviously he was a long-time Buffalo Bill before being moved to the Vikings in the first place. It does make sense. Like, Harrison Phillips has got the contribution that you would want in any individual who's going to pair up alongside a guy like Quinnen Williams. Like, he's not really cracked that kind of superstar territory, but at the same time, he has been nothing but consistent, at least since 2021. I mean, his seasons with Minnesota, for example, saw him in 3 years log 6.5 sacks and also 207 tackles. That's pretty damn impressive for a defensive lineman who stands at 6'3", 307. Like, he also happened to have 4 pass deflections last season as a pure nose tackle. And honestly, again, if you're pairing that up alongside a pass rushing force in Quinnen Williams, that is the perfect complement. Like, Quinnen Williams in his time has been nothing but a monster when it comes to rushing the passer and just being elite at disrupting pretty much everything that comes his way. It's not to say that he's weak at run defense, but having a run stopper like Harrison Phillips allows him to do what he does best on pretty much any single play where they are going to share the field. So in that, again, the unquestioned starter here should be Harrison Phillips. That's the right move. Now again, what it means for Jowon Briggs, again, you're going to have to prove that you can at least do that with a smaller sample size. Because those two guys even will get the share of the reps most of the time. And they say that this Byron Cowart individual is also questionable to return. I honestly do believe by the time that roster cuts are made and by the time the regular season begins, I would actually expect Derrick Nnadi to become the second string defensive tackle behind Harrison Phillips. I mean, the former Chief has got a lot of the experience you would want. He's got Super Bowl pedigree as a champion on that roster as well. Even if he isn't necessarily a star in his own right, he's definitely going to be able to produce for you more so than a lot of these other backup defensive tackles can. So I would expect him to slot in there. But those are the guys that you're going to battle against. For Briggs, though, again, tying it back into him, even with this being mostly about Harrison Phillips, it does show a lot more promise, you know? Like, he could fuck around and become a long-term rotational piece for this team. And I think that's what they're banking on by pairing those moves up together. Because honestly, in this system, Briggs, even if he's not a player that I've known all too well, and even if he is an individual who has not, maybe due to his own skill, maybe due to the Browns just being a shitty franchise, this is going to give him a chance to be able to learn from some of the best in their respective elements. Like Quinnen Williams as a pass rusher, Harrison Phillips as a run-stuffing machine. And they are both established veterans in this game. Briggs is only 23 years old at this point. There could be a lot for him to pick up on there. Like, I can't imagine what he'd be able to learn. But it's going to mostly be about applying it. The Broncos would also get themselves involved in a trade, as they would send Devaughn Vele to the Saints in exchange for a 2026 4th rounder and a 2027 7th rounder. Honestly, I can't blame them for making this move either. You know, Vele was fine for them last season. He had 41 receptions for 475 yards and 3 touchdowns last season. Those are okay numbers. However, this is an individual who, from the jump, was never, and I mean never, going to become the focal point at wide receiver for that offense. There were multiple situations where they're naturally going to favor Courtland Sutton over most people. But you also had guys like Troy Franklin getting involved, also a rookie. You had guys like Marvin Mims Jr. being trusted with making 50-50 contested catches over Vele. And not to mention, yes, he is still fairly young as a person, but when it comes to youth at wide receiver, like they already have their established veteran go-to guy in Courtland Sutton. So to have Vele, a 27-year-old last season, all right, 27 years old, playing for you and putting up those numbers, knowing that he's not going to get a heavy amount of touches like that on a week-to-week basis. Like the Broncos, it was almost inevitable for them to move on to him. Now, I do find it tough that he is being sent to the damn Saints. And I don't know why the Saints is, well, why would you want to take just like, what is, I don't know what their thought process is, but I mean, with some of the other additions that they have made, their core of starters is looking a lot better, okay? I will give them that. You know, a trio of Olave, Shaheed, and Cooks is great. Problem with all of those guys, every single one of them has been their health. You know, Chris Olave has been dealing with multiple concussions that have taken him out for multiple weeks in these seasons. Shaheed is just coming off of an injury, and Brandon Cooks has been a consistent wide receiver at every one of his stops. But as of late, he's also been dealing with a few ailments every now and then. And so what happens when you have to put in all of these backup receivers? Well, you get exactly what happened with the Saints last season. Taking on all of these different low-end rental wide receiver pieces that the casual fan would know nothing about. And as a result, they produced exactly like that. One of the worst receiving units for some time without any of their starters on the field. Like, their depth is non-existent. Completely. Yes, you have Vele being listed as a second string number one, and honestly, that's not a bad move. But as a person who will be going on 28 years old by the end of the year, he should be filling out that role well. There is no excuse for him if he does anything less than that. I'm just being completely honest. There is no room for you to be underwhelming in that situation, because the second that happens, they just got to move on from you. Like, the fact that he stayed that long at Utah was pretty interesting, to say the least. Now again, not everybody's going to be able to leave for the NFL after their second or third year in college. But again, at this point, if you're going to bring all that college experience over, and granted, he was a very good player there, you should be pro ready. You should be. So if he gets that time this season, we need to see that, even if it is going to be in a bit of a limited capacity. Outside of Vele, though, everything else is just underwhelming. I mean, dude, Kevin Austin Jr., Roderick Daniels Jr., Cedric Wilson Jr., Dante Pettis, Bub Means is injured, Mason Tipton, and Moochie Dixon? In all honesty, I'm not even familiar with Daniels Jr. or Dixon. Well, I believe that Daniels Jr. might be a rookie, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, he was from SMU. And honestly, I'm not gonna lie, he was decent there. He was decent. I'll give him that. He's a 22-year-old, so honestly, he could get a few reps as a slot guy. He is 5'9", so I'm not expecting him to come in and magically assert himself as a top wide receiver on the team. But if you need him to get a few spot snaps to catch the defense off guard every now and then, that wouldn't be a bad play. Fine. I'll give him credit for that. But everything else is just, it's so up in the air with this damn team right now. And they have got to do better than that. They just have to. Especially if they are actually trying to shoot for getting a guy like Arch Manning in the 2026 draft. Okay, obviously that rumor's been going around and it was amplified with what Arch Manning himself said about the matter, right? That if that's truly what you're aiming for, you really think that he would succeed in this system? Easily. I mean, yes, again, their top three receivers are great. Juwan Johnson and Taysom Hill are absolute units in their own respects. Don't get me wrong. But if all of those guys find themselves getting hurt, which happens more often than not, they are in deep trouble. Obviously, with guys like Rattler, Shuck, and Heiner right now, who's throwing those top weapons on the squad the ball? I don't know how much you could expect from them this season in that situation. But even still, the entire offense is just an imperfect system. They aren't truly destined to succeed right now, given the way that they're constructed. I don't know, think about this. Right, some of their offensive linemen as well. It's what the hell is going on? Seriously. What exactly are they trying to do here? Because, yeah, they drafted Kelvin Banks Jr. as a blindside blocker, okay? But think about how some of these other guys are looking. Trevor Penning and Dylan Rollins are being moved to left guard. I'm pretty sure both of them were drafted as tackles, if I'm not mistaken. So you're asking them to play positions that they maybe have never done in their entire careers. They've never even reached any amount of snaps in those positions. Eric McCoy at center is decent. But you're also moving Cesar Ruiz, who you drafted at center, to right guard. Why? And then Taliyaz Fuaga was drafted for his versatility, but to have him at right tackle and now currently have him questionable to return, there are just a number of different question marks with this team. They're not going to be good this season. They just aren't, It's just as simple as that. I can go through and just pick apart every single thing going on with this team. But that is the reality right there. They're just not going to be a top team in any sense of the imagination. In fact, they may be the very worst in the NFL. That wouldn't surprise me. But again, Vele, honestly, in that situation, he could be an individual if he does actually show up and contribute in that limited role. If he does see increased talent, given how decimated they could become and given how they're going to be blown out on multiple occasions, I can guarantee that as well. All of these different teams in the NFL, especially with the fact that these games aren't being played in prime time, good. Because you don't even need to see how some of these teams are going to be doing whatever it is they got to do to them on national television. because it is going to get ugly. It is going to get very nasty. Yeah, I can tell you that right now. And a move that would involve another wide receiver, though, and honestly, this makes way more sense. I love this move because the Chiefs earlier in the week would trade Skyy Moore in a 2027 7th rounder to San Francisco in exchange for a 2027 6th rounder. I have gone on and on and on about how depleted that 49ers wide receiver room is. But this is a great pickup. And it can remain that way even when these guys come back. Because Skyy Moore is an individual who certainly has not lived up to his billing. You know, they drafted him out of Western Michigan, the Chiefs did, as this sort of speed demon. And to be honest, to an extent, he did fulfill that very early on in his career. But his issue is consistency. He has not shown it. He has been an egregious dropper of the football. And his route running is very limited right now. You know, obviously he's got the speed, but it seems like all he knows is that. Like, there were situations on multiple occasions where he just overran his route. And that completely messed up chemistry between him and Mahomes, or whichever quarterback might have been filling in for him at that time, if Mahomes might have missed a game with an injury or something like that. Like, for all of the potential, all the buzz that Skyy Moore had, he has underwhelmed. And as they've brought in other receivers, Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice over the past few seasons, DeAndre Hopkins for a little bit, Hollywood Brown, and so on and so forth. And even when some of these guys went down, he's just been getting phased out of the offense. Like, literally phased out completely. You know, with the way that the Chiefs have run their offensive system post Tyreek Hill, he was naturally not going to get a high share of the receptions. I think that part should be very much taken into account. Obviously, the main guy is going to be Travis Kelce. I don't think there's any questioning that. But nonetheless, for your production to dip in every single season is not a good sign. He caught only a single touchdown pass, scored that only touchdown in 2023. And last season, he only appeared in a few games, got 3 targets, and did not record a single stat on that front. And to be facing that kind of situation where you don't even contribute any single thing to the team because, frankly, they didn't want him to be involved in offense. And facing that reality at 24 years old has got to be disheartening in a way. But the 49ers are an offense that could truly make the most of having Skyy Moore. And in fact, the way how Kyle Shanahan runs that offense, the scheme in which they operate with having individuals who can serve as potential running backs and potential wide receivers out of the backfield, this could fit perfectly for Skyy Moore. It could. Now, no, I'm not comparing him to Deebo Samuel. That would be completely stupid. But to have him as an additional weapon to use in those kinds of plays, and with him being as young and fresh as he is, this is a sneakily great decision by that front office in San Francisco. I'm just going to be completely honest. Not to mention that right out of the gates, he will certainly get some looks in. Because, again, there's not a ton that he has to compete with right now. He's still got a lot to prove in his own right, but he's going to play because of all of the injuries and suspensions that everyone else seems to be facing at this point. And those moments will be times for him to prove whether or not he can last in the system. I think there's a great chance that he can do it. And if he does, it alleviates some of their other issues. Like, let Skyy Moore come out and hit the ground running. If Jowon Jennings is dead serious about pursuing this trade, if he doesn't get contract negotiations in his favor, they could be, depending on Skyy Moore, more than willing to let him walk elsewhere. And it would certainly take away reps from some of their younger guys, but at the same time, the same way they've done this running back by committee system, again, they could do a similar thing at wide receiver. Obviously, Jake Cowling has been more of a return specialist for them. But Jordan Watkins, coming out of Ole Miss, was also a prospect who had truly dominated there for a while. Obviously, he had a masterclass of a game at Ole Miss where he went for like 239 receiving yards. So he's definitely got the potential of a big play guy. And to have all of those weapons at your disposal makes things easier for Brock Purdy at the end of the day. So, hey, you'll take it if you're them. And with the 49ers in mind, they wouldn't be done making some pretty sound moves in this time. But we'll leave that for a second because there would be an update for Russell Gage Jr. He would suffer a sprained MCL and he is going to miss a little bit of time. This is a person who has constantly been fighting, whether it be on the Falcons or even the Bucs in recent years, to just get any amount of time on offense to contribute. It's been a struggle for him. And it feels like just when he turns it around or begins to, there's always something. Like, literally, he was decent in Atlanta. Decent. And then yet, after 2022, which he spent with the Bucs, he hasn't been in the NFL in years. Now, as a part of the preseason, trying to reestablish himself as a core piece on a team. He was on the 49ers as a deep backup and didn't get a lot of time. But again, you can't blame the 49ers for taking a chance on him. They need as much help as they can get. And yet, before he can even put up a good enough fight to get in there and secure a roster spot, again, another injury takes away yet another opportunity from a player. Again, I get that they're going to happen no matter what, but it's like, geez, dude. Like, how many fucking times? It's tough, man. But all of that, all of the injuries and shit, it's not a competition, but they may not even compare to what was going on in the Kansas City Chiefs, basically headquarters, stomping grounds, whatever you want to designate, last offseason. Because there would just be a very weird and potentially serious situation that went down last May. And I guess they might have wanted to keep it in-house for a few reasons, but they've just released this information. And I'll honestly get into that aspect of it as I continue talking about it, but I gotta address it head on by first saying, how reckless and stupid can some people be? Seriously. Like, you just have to be a complete and total idiot to find yourself in this kind of situation. And let's just say that those people, they haven't necessarily identified who was involved yet. They're still trying to determine whether or not this was targeted. They don't believe so. They strongly don't believe so. But nevertheless, you just better be damn grateful that you did not end up getting yourself involved in something potentially fatal. Because if that would have happened, goodness gracious, if that shit would have happened, man, it wouldn't have gone well either way. I'm just being honest. But this situation involves Andy Reid. Because, of course, work never really stops when you are a head coach in the NFL. In fact, when you think that you're just free to do whatever it is you want and you're just spending your time doing a number of things, some of the best ideas you might have for ways to call certain plays or different methods to operate within a game setting might come to mind for you. And in those moments, you're going to do whatever you can. You're going to drop that stuff. And you're going to get back into the lab. That's essentially what Andy Reid was doing here. Potentially crafting up a number of different play calls and clock management techniques for the upcoming NFL season at that time. And yet, all of a sudden, in something that you could imagine would frighten even the most composed individual, he had to take a step back completely. Because according to this quote right here, explaining the incident in question, a bullet shattered through glass at Kansas City's practice facility on May 4th, 2024, creating a hole between the window and the blinds of an office, according to the Kansas City Star. The 67-year-old wasn't struck or injured by the bullet, but it launched itself into a wall between Reid's window and entry door just 15 feet from Reid's desk. 2 other bullets also struck the building, one on the 3rd floor, the other in an outdoor air conditioning unit. An investigation into the incident is ongoing, according to Kansas City Police Department spokesperson Captain Jacob Bacina. It is being investigated as an aggravated assault, end quote. Now that designation is because this was going on in a massive setting with people all over the place. And yet you have a number of individuals just going around and willingly trying to do that. It is completely idiotic to think about. I don't understand it. I don't get it. Like, it's great to see that Reid is okay, but he is obviously shaken by this. These reports and others from the AP and ESPN would detail that he now has bulletproof glass in those offices as a security measure after the incident. And, they did as best as they could to try to weather the storm here. I mean, for you to be just 15 feet away from, just think about that. That was the difference between him still being here and potentially being dismembered or even in terrible condition afterwards, right? It's just crazy how things work out sometimes. Yet, not only did he avoid all of that, at least in a physical way, but he was still able to have that in mind and still led them to where they ended up. Even if the Eagles did put belt to ass, they still got there in the midst of that. And the crazy part about it is, too, as this article would display, no other player knew about this situation. It was just Reid dealing with this internally. You know how crazy that sounds? Like, I get that you're trying to have your players focus on the task at hand throughout the NFL season. But my goodness, that is a massive, massive burden to carry. Solo. Like, that is just insane to think about. And yet he did it, without question. There's a massive amount of respect there. But he is obviously still, when you have something like that happen to you, man, there is a lot of trauma that comes with it. So he is still feeling the effects of that to this day, I can guarantee you. But for the sake of many people, again, great to know that nothing more there happened. But now I have to get into the timing of this situation, because it is pretty interesting. Obviously, if this report would have been made public last year, there would just be a massive, massive uproar all over the place. And granted, there still is. But obviously, with the way they are trying to operate now, a lot could potentially be affected by this. Namely, the fact that I've recently reported on the states of Kansas and Missouri being in a struggle for the rights to a new stadium for the Chiefs to play at, in a potential move to Kansas if things go a certain way. And let's be honest, even though the Chiefs have called Missouri their home for a while, to have a report about something like this coming out only makes things much better for Kansas and much worse for Missouri. Now, I don't necessarily know about the crime rate in that city and how bad or good it has been over the past few years. But if you have something like this making national headlines, where the coach of a dynastic team in one of the seminal franchises in the country is in that much potential danger because of the recklessness of a few stupid people, that is not going to be taken lightly whatsoever. And in that situation, even if this is not something that happens all the time, they are going to want to do what is in the best interest of the safety of their team. And so again, whether or not it is warranted, questions are going to start surrounding everyone involved about how safe the area truly is around there. And that could affect the potential move. That could affect the team even being able to stay there in the first place, and they may fuck around and move to Kansas, with the city losing out on that investment because of the stupidity of a few people. It's just crazy stuff to consider. Like, again, it may not end up being fair per se to the overall representation of the city in question, because at the end of the day, the fans, again, truly want the Chiefs in Kansas City. But if you're going to have motherfuckers doing that, there's almost no way that higher authorities would even allow that situation to potentially be repeated again. So I don't know what that outlook is for them from there, but hell nah, man. Meanwhile, the Panthers would sign Taylor Moton to a 2-year, $44 million contract extension. And, I mean, it's a decent signing in my opinion. I feel like it's a little too much money, personally. Moton has obviously been a long-term guy, and so I guess from that standpoint, it is fair to give him a little bit of a higher salary at this point. He has been on a Panthers team that has just been known for being terrible ever since he's gotten there. He stuck through this entire time. So you probably owe him that respect to pay him like he is a top lineman in the NFL. But in all honesty, when it comes to the contributions on the field, that's not something I've seen from him, personally speaking. So to dish out all that money specifically to him is a little bold in my opinion. Now, granted, because of how bad they've been, they've probably got enough money in their cap room. They've got enough money to make that happen, I'm sure. But is it necessary? You probably could have paid him less than that, and he probably would have taken it. But that's just me. Here we are with the 49ers again, making yet another solid move. Because they would pick up Brian Robinson Jr. from Washington, and they would send the Commanders a 2026 6th-round pick. I just can't believe that the Commanders actually made the move. I don't know how they are trusting some of these people over what Brian Robinson Jr. has done for them. Like I said in the last recap of overall events, it's just insane. A lot of those guys are unproven, and yet because of the potential, yes, the buzzword we've all known for years, you don't just choose any amount of consistency over that, because that's what he's been giving you since he's been in the NFL and healthy. And, to send him to the 49ers, okay, if that's what you're willing to do, fine. And getting back a 6th-round pick isn't necessarily bad, but this makes the 49ers a lot better at the running back position, and it gives them a solid number 2 option who will be reliable enough behind Christian McCaffrey, and in situations where he potentially gets hurt, he could step up as the number 1. He has proven, especially last season as well, they utilized him all over the place. They got him a decent amount of receptions with the way Jaden Daniels operated, and he was also able to gash teams completely in the run. Christian McCaffrey is obviously going to get the most touches on the team. But again, as a backup plan, as a sort of complement to the way that McCaffrey operates as a running back, Brian Robinson Jr. will fit like a glove on that team. So this is another great move for them. And now back to the injury bug. Yeah, because that's nice. Derrick Harmon is going to have a week-to-week designation. He suffered a knee sprain in the middle of the Panthers game, where he was actually producing very nicely. They feared that it was going to be way worse than that. Thank goodness that it wasn't. But he will still miss at least a few games in the season. And it sucks. This is a guy that I do think, again, could hit the ground running with the way that Steelers defense is. He could be in for a pretty solid rookie outing. And honestly, if he doesn't miss enough time, he still can. Meanwhile, Jermaine Burton of the Bengals and Ethan Pocic of the Browns are dealing with knee injuries. Now, I don't know how much time either of these people will miss, but it'll definitely hurt the Bengals a little bit. But at the same time, they've got the depth in their receiver room to last without Burton. And for the Browns, I don't know, man. Their run blocking is certainly going to take a hit. Of course, though, both of their running backs right now, again, Judkins and Sampson could be good prospects, but they are unproven. So I don't know how that'll end up going. We will see. Aidan O'Connell would suffer a fractured wrist, and he is also going to miss 6 to 8 weeks. If anything, this clears up room for Cam Miller to be a direct backup. And honestly, with the preseason that Miller has had, this is probably something he deserves as it is. You would hope that Aidan O'Connell can get better and recover from it, but I just don't know if this would truly affect his ability to play this season, because Geno Smith has been designated as a starter already. And then with Cam Miller assuming the number 2 role eventually through what he's shown, that just leaves Aidan O'Connell in an odd spot. Even if he is hurt, and even when he returns, I don't know if he's going to be able to regain that, barring any unforeseen event for those two. I just wouldn't bank on that right now. And just before I got into recording this, the Vikings would get pretty active. They would trade Sam Howell and a 2026 rounder to the Eagles in exchange for a 2026 5th rounder and a 2027 7th rounder. I can understand it. For him potentially to be a backup behind J.J. McCarthy, and with you losing a proven guy, I should say, like Nick Mullins, you just gotta, at that point, bite the bullet and recognize that Sam Howell is going to be far from the answer. So I totally understand them doing this. It's just not surprising. And they've got a lot of question marks anyways. They, apparently, as I'm seeing here, do not have an official depth chart right now. Again, that's going to change, but it's there are a lot of holes on this team that they're trying to fill, and a lot of different things they're trying to hash out right now. So to have certainty there is important. Even if J.J. McCarthy is a rookie, and even if you've shown tremendous faith in him, a number of things could happen in literally a game, let alone an entire season. So if you need someone to step up, they are someone that you should trust in that event. And Sam Howell has proven that cannot be the case. Obviously his season in Washington, where he went for pretty much 20 touchdowns, it was a solid season. But that still came with a tremendous amount of inconsistency. Because how the fuck do you throw for exactly 21 touchdowns and 21 interceptions en route to a losing record? What kind of shit is that? And then when this man came into the fucking Packers game last season for the Seahawks, man, he was just absolute dog shit. He was dog shit as a backup. And yet, all the Seahawks were trying to do was give him a little bit of faith in the fact that Geno Smith was out at that point in the game. He couldn't even do that. So to believe that he could step in for a Vikings squad who, at this point of time, does have a slight edge in roster construction over Seattle's talent right now, I'll admit that. You'd think he'd be able to do well with that if he couldn't manage with a team who is nearly on the same tier in terms of talent. No. So they did the right thing. And honestly, it's a miracle that they even got any draft compensation out of the Eagles. But with them just coming off of a Super Bowl win, they don't give a fuck about those late round picks, to be honest with you. And they can also afford to take on a guy like Sam Howell. Now, you have Tanner McKee there, and Kyle McCord could make the roster. He may not make the roster. We'll end up seeing what happens in the next couple of days. But again, Jalen Hurts, as long as you've got him, you're all good in that department. But the Eagles would have some connection to the next guy involved, because in pairing with this move, the Vikings would later go on to sign Carson Wentz as a backup. Yeah, we're talking about having a backup quarterback that is reliable and that you can trust. Should we really be trusting Carson Wentz in 2025 after the past stops he's been at as a starter? Probably not. More often than not, in those situations, whether it be him with the Colts, whether it be him with the Rams, or whether it be him with the Commanders, the Carson Wentz, who damn near got an MVP in 2017, was far, far removed from that. Even though, especially with the Colts, the counting numbers look okay, man, in the biggest moments of these seasons, he did not show up. In health has also been an issue for him. Obviously he hasn't gotten a ton of reps over the last few seasons, but even when he was at his peak, the fact that this injury just completely derailed your career still didn't stop him from getting a Super Bowl win. But you don't even really get credit for leading the team there, even though they had an 11-2 record with him as a starter, because Nick Foles managed to go out there and just put on an absolute tear. Not you. Even with that sort of fall from Carson Wentz due to all of the hero ball shit and all of the general inconsistencies he's had, think about this. As a starter, technically speaking, in the NFL, he has a record of 47, 46, and 41. That's pretty mediocre stuff for a starter. But at the same time, as a backup, it's not as bad as some people might think. This is a player who does understand the game very well. And, J.J. McCarthy, being as young as he is, to learn from a quarterback who has reached that peak of success in the league at least one time, even if it happened just one time. That is an experience that a younger individual like McCarthy could learn from. No question about it. And to have that record is a little bit telling. But again, as a backup, if we're taking it into perspective, you would kill to have a backup like that who could, on average at least, win more games than he loses. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. And again, obviously, they wouldn't be getting Carson Wentz as a long-term solution, but to just have him fill out that role and giving advice to J.J. McCarthy, like, obviously, you could play him out like he's a scrub, but this is an individual that he can actually learn something from. Yeah, that going on, and you get him for cheap. That's a win-win move for many right there. So, that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.